Western powers, including the United Nations and NATO, are keeping up the pressure on Russia to pull its troops out of Georgia. Germany said the latest delays were unsatisfactory, and the United States said Russia's withdrawal must be speeded up. Georgia itself continues to accuse Russia of an organised, well-planned invasion of its territory. Euronews spoke to the Georgian Foreign Minister, Tkeshlashvili.
Madam Minister, welcome to Euronews.
Thank you.
What's your view of what's happened in the past 2 weeks?
Well, in the past 2 weeks, unbelievable chain of events evolved in my country. I would never believe that in 21st century, in the modern civilized world community, I would say, in Europe, my country would have been militarily invaded by the neighbor country, Russian Federation. That's what happened. What we've seen, it was already not ad hoc skirmishes from the separatist regimes only, but it was a well-planned, large-scale military operation with which we've been placed in a position either to respond or right away to surrender to Russian military. Because on the night when the large-scale confrontation happened, the villages had been extensively shelled, and through the rocket tunnel from the north, already tanks and armored vehicles were coming in a large scale. So the attack had been very, very harsh. Casualties had been rising at the time. So the decision had been taken to respond to that, basically.
You're saying Russian forces entered Georgian territory before Tsinvali was attacked by Georgian forces. Is that right?
It was from the rocket tunnel. It is the north part of the South Ossetia's region, which is the main connecting route from Russia to South Ossetia. So it was this tunnel with which the all military equipment had been coming, and it was already on the 7th of August that the large-scale movement started, meaning tanks and armored vehicles coming into the territory of South Ossetia.
Russia denies that. It says there was no military reaction from its side before 1 day or a day and a half passed since the starting of bombardment of Tsinvali.
Well, I mean, there is very credible information collected not from the Georgian side, but every other state which has an intelligence information from aerial pictures. It's credibly seen that it's already within a day, it was already 6,000 Russian soldiers on the territory of South Ossetia.
Why was Tsinvali attacked and not the rocket tunnel where, as you say, Russian military was entering Georgia?
Well, first of all, the imminent response was to respond to the threat that was coming to the Georgian villages, and then the threat was coming with artillery shellings from Tsinvali, and that was the military response to that. And other than that, again, the tactical moves about the rocket tunnel, I know that we've been able to damage the bridge from which the equipment would have ordinarily come out of the rocket tunnel, but then they managed to bypass that bridge and then still enter with heavy equipment.
Did Georgian forces use multiple rocket launchers and other indiscriminate assault weapons against residential blocks of Tsinvali, as Russia claims?
Well, the targets that had been used for the military forces from the Georgian side were the legitimate targets, which was the artillery weapons from the other side. It had been very unfortunate that the artillery from the other side had been placed in some cases in the residential areas, because it's the responsibility of a party which uses any weapon to install this weapon or the object, military object, which in itself is a legitimate target for an attack, outside of any location with which civilians can be impacted. It would have been the same obligation for the Georgian forces not to place its own weapons right in the middle of the residential areas, so that when the opposing party would respond to the artillery or any other firing from the Georgian side, they would inevitably hit then, in that case, the civilian targets as well.
Did that happen? Because Russian military sources say some of the Georgian artillery was placed in Gori.
Absolutely incorrect. I've been in Gori during the confrontation times myself several times. Nothing in the center of Gori had ever been placed there. What we've seen from the Russian side was not an collateral damage to the civilians that they've inflicted, but very direct targeting of civilian objects.
Russia argues it had to conduct a peace enforcement operation after the assault of Tsinvali left hundreds or even thousands dead. mostly civilians and mostly of Russian citizenship. Doesn't Moscow have a point there?
If there is any need of enforcement of peace in any part of the globe, then it's a specific task of the Security Council under Chapter 7 to decide upon those measures and implement those measures. No state can ever unilaterally take upon itself a role of a peace enforcer. Leaving that aside, I mean, in terms of the propaganda information that Russia is using in this whole endeavor, well, Human Rights Watch already was in a position to see situation on the ground and then collect information. And the statement that we've already seen from Human Rights Watch is quite clear, saying that information that Russian side puts out is not substantiated. There are no evidences that confirm the level of casualties or the level of damage that the Russian side portrays as the pretext for its military invasion into Georgia. So if Russian side has any evidences, they better present that.
Russia says the reintegration of Georgia is now impossible. Apparently Moscow is getting ready to recognize independence of the breakaway republics. Do you see any other way out of this?
Well, plans from the Russian side are quite clear. They wanted to initially destabilize Georgia, to provoke confrontation in Georgia, and then with that to make sure that Georgia can never be an independent state from Russia. That's the ultimate goal. That is why the regime change was something that they've targeted at. And I don't have an expectation that they will easily give up that target. So it will be a very tense period in which we have to be united in confronting that aspirations of the Russian Federation.
Do you have any hope of solving the territorial conflict now?
Definitely yes. If we will be able to establish genuinely international format for negotiations and security on the ground, I'm more than confident that we will be able, step by step, to establish a process in which reintegration of these regions will be full scale for the benefit of all who used to live in those regions, who now live in those regions, and they will be prosperous parts of prosperous Georgia if that is the case then.
Lately we heard new statements predicting Georgia's future among the NATO members. Do you feel pressed to solve the territorial conflict because of this issue?
Now, after what happened in Georgia, I think it's again a common understanding that this conflict had to be solved quickly, in a prompt manner. And effectively, because if not that, then they will always remain open platforms for Russia's manipulation of the situation in those regions, and with that jeopardizing situation in Georgia, and with that jeopardizing further integration of Georgia into the community of Western democracies, and trying again to regain its sphere of influence as it sees so in our part of the world.
Thank you, Madam Minister.
Thank you for having a chance of discussion.